Hi, this is Clinton Saunders from Seaside Extended way down in Cape Town, South Africa. I'm back with the fourth installment of our video series on creating financial reports in Excel by connecting to Business Central financial data. I'm excited about today's video because I'm going to show you the really cool tools that you can use to build your financial reports in Excel really quickly. So in summary, today I'm going to show you, starting with a blank Excel workbook, we will connect to the Business Central Financial Summary web service as a refresher to video 1. Then we will do some additional data modeling on the data to shape it in the form we need it for our reports. Then I will show you how we can explore the data using pivot tables in Excel. And then I will introduce 2 very powerful Excel formulas that we can use to explore the data further. And then we will combine the use of the Excel pivot tables and the 2 Excel formulas to start to build a financial report. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. So let's start in Business Central so that I can show you how to add the Financial Summary web service to the web services page and expose the data so we can connect to it. So let's navigate to the web services page. So in Business Central, I'll go to my search bar, navigate to web services and open up the page. So here we have a list of all our published web services. Because the Financial Summary web service page that I introduced to you in video 3 is part of an extension, it won't be listed here. So to add it, we simply click on New in the Web Services ribbon. That'll create a new line. Okay. We first in the object type field, we select object type page. We then drill down on the object ID field, and then we'll select from full list. Then we'll search for Financial Summary. That'll find the page for us. We'll select that web service. And then we'll go across to the service name, and we'll give the service name something very simple and short, because that becomes part of the URL. Okay, so I'm calling it Fin Summary. And then finally, to expose the web service to Excel, we simply publish it by clicking on the Published field. Okay, just one note, if you haven't got our extension installed with the Financial Summary web service page, then obviously you won't find it when you do the search here. So just bear that in mind. So if you do want to play with this, you can try and connect to one of the other options that we sort of highlighted in video 3. But basically, we've got this web service is now published, and we are able to then connect to it from Excel. So now let's start with a blank Excel workbook. I've copied the URL from the OData URL column in Business Central web services page to my clipboard. So let's go to Data, Get Data from Other Sources, from OData Feed. So this is where we need to paste our URL that I copied. So I'll go ahead and paste it right here. Okay, now if you remember from video 1, if we copied the URL from the Business Central web services page, we will be logged into a specific Business Central company. And so the URL we copied will reference that company. And we can see that here, just after the company section of the URL, in brackets, we have the reference to the company that we were in. Also, because we selected the specific web service we wanted to when we copied the URL will also reference that web services, and we see that here at the end of the URL. So if we carried on from here, then we'd end up with a connection to the specific company and the specific web service. What I want to do is connect to multiple companies, and if you remember from the first video, all we have to do to achieve that is to remove everything after company in the URL. So that's what I'm going to do. So from here right to the end, we're going to clear that. And then we're going to go OK. And after a couple of seconds, we'll get a data preview. So what we're looking at over here now is a list of all the companies, and then the columns are all the web services in that Business Central database. So I need to transform this a little bit. So I'm going to click on the Transform Data button. And that will launch Power Query. Let's get it across to the right window. That'll launch the Power Query application where I can carry on and start to do further transformations. Okay, so once we're in Power Query, we can start to transform the data. And basically, each transformation step we perform will get added here to the right here under the Applied Steps pane. Right, so the first thing we want to do is choose the web service that we're going to use. So in order to do that, I'm going to use the Choose Columns action here on the ribbon. So we click on that, click on Choose Columns, and then that'll list all the columns in the web service. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I keep the name of the company, and then I'm going to be selecting my Fin Summary web service. Click on OK, and then I'm reduced down to just the one column, and a new step's been added to the Applied Steps pane. So what I need to do next is to expand the Fin Summary web service. So I'm going to click on the little expand action item there. And then I'm going to be very selective here. So I'm going to just remove everything to start with. And then I'm going to reselect. I need the start date. I'm not going to select the end date because that's not really going to add any value to this data. I want the GL account number. I'm going to select these two global dimensions. I want the period name, account name, income balance, account category, account subcategory. I'm not going to worry about the next two fields or any more dimensions, although you could select up to 8 dimensions if you wanted to. And then I'm going to select some of these numbers. I want the period actual, year-to-date actual, prior period actual, prior year, year-to-date actual, the full year for the prior year. I'm not going to select any other prior years. And then I want the period budget, year-to-date budget, and full year budget. I'm not going to select any forecasts at this point. You click on I'm also going to remove this little option here that says use original column as name prefix because I don't really want to do that. I don't want all my columns prefixed by Fin Summary. Then I'm going to go OK. And now basically I have every single company with every single field names as we did when we did video 1. Right, the next thing I want to do is I want to rename all the columns so that they have meaningful names in my data. So for example, name is not going to be very helpful with regards to the company name. I also don't really like these little underscores in all my field names, and also these global dimension 1, global dimension 2. What do they actually mean? Okay, the web service unfortunately doesn't bring through the dynamic names. It simply uses the generic names in Business Central. So to change the name of a column, you simply double click on the name, on the column name, and you retype in the name of the company, the name of the column. What I typically do with these underscores is I just simply remove them and have a field name that looks like that. So I'm going to pause the video at this point and carry on naming all the columns for you, and then pick it up after that. Right, the magic's been done, and I've renamed all the columns. So taken out all the underscores, shortened some of the names like account category. I just made category and subcategory as well, and then I've just done some sort of convention on the numbers as well. The last step I want to do is I want to make sure that all my data types are what they need to be. So you can see the start date here, for example, is the date time. I don't need that. But I also want to make sure that all my data types are explicitly set to the ones I want them to be. Power Query does do some automatic transformation, but it doesn't always get it right, and I don't want to be reliant on that fact, so I'm going to explicitly do that. So to change the data type of a field is quite simple. You can do it one of two ways. You can either, for a single column, just click on this little icon next to the column name here, and then select the correct data type. So even though it is already correct, I'm going to just select it so that I force a step to be created here under the Applied Steps columns, which does an explicit change to the data type. The other way is if I want to do multiple columns at the same time, I can use my control click on multiple columns, and then I can go across to the transform tab here on the ribbon and click on the data type that I want to select. Okay, so again, I'm going to pause the video and do that all for you and work some magic. Right, so all my types are changed to the correct types, data types. The next thing I want to do is I've just realized that I actually wanted to add one more step in, but I want that step to occur before the change type step. So what I need to do then is just click on the previous step or whatever step it is that I want to add the new step onto. And then what I want to do is I want to add a new column in here which concatenates the account number with the account name, and create a new column called full account name with that information in it. So to do that, I'm going to click on the add column tab in the group in the ribbon, and click on custom column. Because I'm not at the final step here, it's going to ask me if I want to insert a new step at this stage. I'm going to say insert. And then I'm going to have a little window in which I need to enter a column name and a formula. Okay, so the column name is going to be full account name. And then my formula is going to be a simple concatenation of two fields. To do that, I just click on the actual account number, use the AND symbol. I want to add in a little dash with spaces on the other side. And then I want to go click on and I want the account name. Okay, that's it. When the formula is correct and there's no more syntax errors, you'll get this little indication at the bottom here, then you're good to go. So I'm going to click on OK. So a new step will get added there called add custom, and in a moment you'll see the new column with the information inside it. I'm just going to go down to the last step again and just include that field in my data type changes. Right, we have one more thing to do, and that's to give this query a better name. So I'm going to call it data. Okay, as simple as that. And then we need to load this into Excel. So if you remember from a previous video, that we want to load that not into an Excel table, but into the Excel data model. So we're going to click on close and load to. And then in this window here, we're going to select only create a connection, and then activate the add this data to the data model. We'll click on OK, and then that data will load in. I'll let that happen, and then we can pick it up from there. Okay, so now our data is pulled into Excel, into the Excel data model. If ever we want to refresh that, we just use the refresh all button here on the data tab. Okay, so now we want to start exploring the data. And the most obvious way to do that is using a pivot table. So if we go across to the insert pivot table, you'll notice that when this window comes up, this option here is enabled by default. Use this workbook's data model, and that's because Excel has detected that there is data in a data model, and then it sets that as the default. Okay, so I'm going to go OK, and then you'll notice we have access to the data query that we used to extract, that we named our query. And if I open that up and expand it, you'll see we have all the fields. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the company into the filters option here, and the start date, and I'm also going to pull in the income balance. Then I'm going to set the filter on the income balance to be income statement, so that I can basically have a pivot table purely only of the income statement. Then what I'm going to do, what I could do, is I could analyze, look at what categories there are, or if I want to, I can go down to subcategory level, or even better, because I want my report to display every single GL account, so I'm going to use our new field that we created called the full account name, and have that as the rows. Okay, and then I'm going to pull the period actual as a value. You'll notice when I do that, it changes the name of the field to sum of period actual. Okay, that is what we refer to as the implicit measure for the totaling up of the period actual. Okay, that's what pivot tables do. They create these implicit measures, and they're named sum of, and then the name of the field. Right, the other field I want to put in here is the year-to-date actual, and I'll stop there in terms of what I'm going to pull through. Okay, so what's basically happening in a pivot table is that these numbers are calculated by applying filters on this data table here. Okay, and the filters that this number will be applying is essentially filtering on all account full name rows that have that value, that are income statement. Okay, in this instance I haven't got any filters on the start date and the company, but if I had to choose a company here, and I just chose February, then obviously those additional filters will be applied, and so these numbers dynamically change. Okay. Now the problem with pivot tables is that we can't really build a financial report as a pivot table because it's not very dynamic. We can't create subtotals very easily, and that's a problem. But if we could get all these numbers, if we could have a formula that could calculate them, wouldn't that make our lives a lot easier? Okay, so the good news is that there's actually two formulas that we can use, and we can use them together. And the even better news is that we don't have to even write the formulas. There's a way we can use to generate the formulas for us from the pivot table. Okay, so let me show you how to do that. So you make sure that you're in the pivot table, and then you go onto the Excel ribbon, onto the Analyze group, and you select the one here, this option here that says OLAP Tools, and then you select Convert to Formulas. You leave this checkbox unchecked because we don't want to convert the actual filter section to formulas. We only want to convert the actual pivot table itself, and if we tick that, it'll convert the filters as well, which we don't want to do. So I'm going to click on Convert, and then you can see that the pivot table changed slightly in look and feel because it's no longer a pivot table, it is now a bunch of formulas. Now the two formulas are cube member and cube value. So the cube member formula is wherever we have fields from the data that we want to apply our filters on. So all these account names, and then also the measures as well. The measures are referenced using a cube member formula. So just to explain the cube member formula very quickly, if you look at it, it's essentially got two parts. The first part is a reference to the connection, which in the case of of data sitting inside the Excel data model, the connection is actually called this workbook data model. Okay. The second part is the actual reference to the member that we want to display. So the first part of it is, in this case, it's a data element coming from the data query. The next part is actually the field name, and the third part is the reference to the actual account name or the value of the account name. Each of these parts is enclosed by a square bracket. In the case of the measure, the only difference there is instead of it, this is not actually a field. There's no field called sum of period actual. So this is actually an implicit measure, as I pointed out earlier. So we start off the first part of the member is the measure, is the word measures, and then it's basically the name of the measure. So there's only two parts to that to that thing. One additional thing we can do with a cube member is that if I go into Illustrator, if I go down to the bottom here, we've got a cube member, we've got a grand total. Now there isn't an account called grand total. So what that is a cube member from the workbook data model that's referencing the data full account name, but then instead of actually referencing a specific account name, it's got this word all in there. That's a way of doing a filter on it's like selecting everything. Okay, but then you'll see there's a third parameter here, which is actually an optional caption parameter. So in the case like this where you don't want to actually name this thing all, because if I took that away, if I took that caption away, then they would say all, which wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. Okay, so what you can do with the cube member formula is you can add the optional captional parameter by adding a literal text reference to what you want to call the field, and then you'll see that changes the name of the actual field. Now that's quite useful as well on column headings, because there's no report that we want to name, we want to put sum of period actual or sum of period year to date actual on the top of the report. So that's a very good place to use this additional parameter, where we could say period actual, or we could say period year to date actual. And then we could have more meaningful column names without actually changing the, with still leaving the functionality to have the correct measure referenced. Okay, and then the other formula is the cube value formula, and that's also got two parts. Although the second part is a number of is broken up into different options. But again, the first part is the reference to the connection, which is this workbook data model. And then the second part is a one or many members. Okay, and those members can either be references to data fields or or references to measures. Okay, so you'll notice that in this formula that if I push the F2 here, you can see that it's referencing cell B1, which is the company filter, cell B2, which is the start date, cell B3, which is whether it's an income statement or balance sheet account, cell A6, which is the reference to the account name, the account full name, and then B5 is the measure period actual. Okay, the next one has got everything's the same except for the fact that we're looking at C5 because it's a different measure. You know, you'll notice one of the things that's inside this account is this formula is that it is also filtering on this income balance, but in actual fact, it's probably an unnecessary filter because the account 6110 is an income statement account. It can only be an income statement account. It will always be an income statement account. So in actual fact, B3 isn't really necessary in this formula. So we could actually alter the formulas by taking some of the elements, the unnecessary elements out. You can see it gives us the same answer. Okay, if I copy that across to that side, the formula is dynamically referencing the cell values using the dollar symbol there to fix either the cell column or row. So that's why I was able to just copy the formula across. So I've changed the formula, but it actually gives me the same result because it means the same thing. It's only filtering on the account name now, plus these filters to give me the answer. What's also nice about these formulas, when they're pointing to to cells that are inside a pivot table filter section, I can still operate these filters, and they will change the values. So if I go down to just one company, you'll see that the numbers dynamically change very, very quickly, and that's the beauty of these formulas. Okay, so what we really are doing here is we're beginning to start writing a report. We're working with these formulas, structuring the cells and the rows and columns and building a report. Now, one of the things in that process might be that we might want to sub-analyze an account into one of the dimensions. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a freeze pane on here quickly. So view, freeze pane, freeze, so I can keep going down. And let's just take one of these accounts. The most common one that I like to use quite a lot is the salaries account. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some rows in there. And then what I want to do is I actually want to break this account by the account down by department. Okay. So really what I need, in order to do that, I need to be able to add, so I'm going to still reference the salaries account, but I also need to reference a department or various departments. So in order to do that, I need to have a cube member that references departments. Okay, so a quick way to do that is just to go to the side here, go and insert a new pivot table, and then just in the rows of that pivot table, just add the department. And then I can go and do my little trick, my analyze, OLAP tools, convert to formulas. And now I've got cube member formulas that point to my departments. Okay. Right, so now what I could do then is I could then take this formula, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fix the reference to the salaries account by putting a dollar next to the row on both that formula and this one, so that when I copy this down, and let's just copy it down to there for now, it'll still point to the salaries account. But now what I want to do is I want to add, after the account, I want to add a pointer to the department code. And then what I'll do is I'll just fix the column so that I can copy that to that side, and then I can copy it down. And now what I've got is I've got my salaries account broken down by department. If I hover over those, the total is 32,159, which is the same number as that. And that one there is 64,319, which is the same number as that. So that's, and then, you know, I don't like the names over here. So what I could do is, because it's a Cube member formula, I could go in here and actually add the optional captions prep property and type in the full name of the department and have it actually display the proper department name there. Okay, that's basically what I'm going to cover in this video. So I just wanted to recap what we've covered so far in all the videos. So essentially I've shown you how to connect to Business Central data in multiple companies from Excel, how to model or shape that data into a useful format, and then how to explore that data using pivot tables, and then to use the pivot tables to generate Cube member and Cube value formulas so that we can build dynamic financial reports. In the next video, we'll combine these last two steps to actually build a rich income statement. I hope I'll see you in that video. Until then, cheers.